Cora. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Cora Iberkleid. And just, I guess, a technical note before we get started, Paul, but I still don't see the streaming on YouTube on my other computer. So I don't know
really?
if...
You have to do a refresh?
Yeah.
Maybe you have to do a refresh or...
Oh, there we go. Okay, it's kicking.
Yeah.
Okay, there we go.
Cool.
Oh, there we go. Okay, it's kicking. There. Okay, now I've muted that. Okay.
Cool. Well, this is
Perfect.
both of our first time doing TGIK. So I don't know if two new people make one regular person, or if we make two new people make one very, very new person. So we'll see how we go. Everyone, be kind to us. I see we already have some people. Sevi, hi, how's it going? Lamati, happy Friday to you. Walid and David. It would not be TGIK without the good vibes, so thank you. We have Nahul from Argentina. Thank you. Thank you for joining us from Argentina. Let me see.
A very international crowd.
Yeah, it is a very international. Oh, we have Steve Wade. Hey, how's it going? And Moz.
I saw the Netherlands somewhere.
Oh, do we have and Juka, I hope I said that right, from Helsinki. Welcome. Fully Geared Bear. Hello. Rex Roof is from Ann Arbor, Michigan. That's a long way. We got Matthias from Stuttgart. Yogi from Singapore. Oh, we're all over the place. I wonder what the time is in Singapore. It should be like really early morning, or... Yeah, Rex, my microphone is playing up. We tried to fix it, and we didn't have good luck. So when I'm not talking, I'll mute. And so at least Cora is pretty clean.
4 a.m.
It's actually a bit weird because Cora hears me okay. So there's something between my microphone and OBS that is happening that's different between my microphone and where Cora is. So technology, right? And we have Elon Musk. I don't think that's the real Elon Musk. He's from Pune, India. I learnt recently that Elon Musk is actually short for elongated muskrat. Is actually his full name. And he just shortened it. So that's a piece of trivia. Christoph from Dusseldorf, welcome. David, yes, I am definitely routing around the globe twice. I actually added 2 VPNs to make sure I would do the full loop twice. So that's just making sure we get the authentic experience. You know, usually we have some coins and garden noise to deal with Duffy, so I thought I would make sure we had something to make up for that. I hope
the Mother of Dragons is tuning in.
I hope you've all seen this background I have up, which is probably one of the best Zoom backgrounds / memes I've seen in a long time. So I thought I would add that up as my background, as it's kind of fitting. So I guess we've done some hellos and some welcomes. Steve says I'm hilarious. I'm not sure if that is entirely accurate, but I'll take it. I will definitely take it. I actually think it's my Canadian accent that makes me funnier to most people.
Your Canadian accent.
They don't really understand what I'm saying, so they just assume that it's funny.
Does everybody speak with a Canadian accent in Australia? Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. Yeah, well, I don't know if you've heard Bob do it, but Bob has a Canadian accent routine, which is him doing an Australian accent.
I'll have to hit him up for that.
Yeah, as Tasha just said, where's Bob Brindley when we need him? All right, so I guess we should probably share up our notes, and so let me hit some buttons and make sure I do this right. So hopefully, there it is. So the people on the stream should see my notes, and Cora won't. So I need to double share things because that's how.
But I can see them on the. I have my handy side computer.
That's true, but it's easier if you can look forward. So you should see them now.
It is. Yes.
You see them now. All right. So we are episode 131, and we are creatively named No Mo YOLO with Validating Admission Controller webhooks. And so sort of run through our week in review, and then we will kick off into webhooks. So, core Kubernetes 1.19.1 is out. We do have a changelog, and I looked at it earlier, and it was really boring. And really boring is kind of what you want for a patch release changelog. So you can see we're like explicitly using -- platform, and we're building images, making sure we're using the right architecture for our images. Couple of minor bug fixes, but like it's only like 10 or so like bugs or regressions, so that's pretty good. And then a couple of cleanup-y things, so that's pretty good for a patch release changelog. Nothing exciting or surprising, or hopefully nothing's going to break you when you do an upgrade, which of course you'll do real soon, right? Because we all keep our Kubernetes clusters like super up to date. We have point releases are scheduled for September 16th. I won't worry about clicking through to that. We have a proposal for a new working group, because what every open source project needs is new working groups. So let's see what's going on there. Yeah, so what are we doing? We're just creating a reliability working group so that we can invest more into the reliability of Kubernetes. So I assume this is the reliability of Kubernetes itself, as opposed to, let me just pump my volume down a little bit.
Do you see, Paul, George is suggesting maybe you can dial into Skype from your phone, wondering if that would help.
Yeah, okay. Do you want to?
There are comments about the static.
Do you want to take over, and I will mute myself and try and sort something out?
Yeah, let's see.
Yeah, so I'll switch to your screen if you want to share your screen and open up notes.
Okay, so I'm sharing.
Perfect. Yep, we see it up there. All right, I'm already muted on the stream, so go for it.
Oh, okay. All right, well, so I was less prepared to do this, so I'm going to kind of have to guess my way through this. But so George, if you have any helpful comments to do the week in review, but helpful warnings ahead. So we have some deprecation warnings, some some metrics things, some changes, I guess, in the output, some deprecations relating to metrics, and audits, some custom resource definition deprecations, cron tabs. Oh, interesting. Admission webhooks. Hope these aren't deprecated just as we're starting to look into them. Something about returning a warning message passed along to the API client. This is for the ops people out there, says George. All right, so that's cool. Let's look at the next one. Steering committee election update. Nomination exception processes are now closed. So I guess you'll get a warning from the CLI tools when you hit something that's deprecated. And this election update for the steering committee. So an update on the steering committee election timeline. The final candidate list is available, formalized and closed on September 8th. So a few resources if you have any questions. Your election officers this go around are Josh Burkus and Ihor Dvoretsky. I hope I am saying that right. Okay, the audio is better now. Yeah, that might probably because hopefully Paul can figure it. Yeah, do you want to try it?
I think we're good now. I've just changed a few settings, added some noise suppression to my OBS settings. So hopefully we're better now. And I switched microphones. I'm still staticky. Why? But a little bit better. All right. Well, I'm sorry, folks. We'll have to live with the microphones we have. We thought we had it, but I guess we don't. Let me switch back to my screen if you
Sure.
want.
I'm at the KubeCon video. You can take
Yeah.
over from there.
So I was going to quickly mention something I saw on the warnings. So I'll pop back to that for a second. Can I make it bigger? Make it a little bit bigger. So one thing I thought was interesting was they added a feature so that it sends the warnings to the API clients, but it does it using the standard like HTTP header for warnings. And so it's not actually part of the API payload, which means that it's much easier. Well, first of all, there's no status code changes or changes to the API payload. So basically, any client that talks to Kubernetes via the HTTP sockets can read those response headers and get the warnings and print them out. So I think that's pretty cool. And then I saw with the CRDs, there's now an option, where was it? To provide a deprecation message. Here we go. Yeah, so deprecation warning here. So deprecate a true deprecation warning. And that warning will make its way back through the HTTP headers from the Kubernetes API itself and kubectl or whatever Kubernetes client you're using should be able to see those and interpret them appropriately. So I thought that was definitely worth mentioning because I think it's quite clever to, instead of messing with the API and potentially make some breaking changes in the API, adding a HTTP response seems like a really smart way of doing it. Yeah, so Cora was just showing that the YouTube videos were up. So that's pretty great. Apparently my bandwidth is all the way down. And looks like a pretty complete list. One thing that I always get tripped up on is this search bar up here is for searching all of YouTube, not searching the playlist or the channel you're in. And I don't know how to actually search the play. Oh, no, I don't want to do that. I guess you can always just do a word search for Helm or whatever and find the stuff you're interested in. So I've always found that a little bit frustrating in YouTube, but we've got the videos up, which is cool. So if you missed anything, that would be a good idea. Yeah, Tiffany, it's not actually Skype that's the problem. It's something to do with OBS, unfortunately. So we just have to live with it, unfortunately. Where were we? JetStack. I thought this was really interesting. So a live CNI migration. So ripping out the network from underneath a Kubernetes cluster and jamming a new one in. In this case, they went from Canal to Cilium. And so they're not even similar, right? Like if you went from flannel to calico, you've at least got some similar bits. Whereas this is a major change, and I bet there was some really interesting things they had to do to rip it out. We a few years ago, back in the, are we allowed to say the words OpenStack here? I hope so. Hopefully we don't get kicked off the air for saying OpenStack. But I remember at Blue Box we had to write a live upgrade to go from Nova Network to Neutron Network, and that was like a ridiculously painful thing to do. And so I would imagine it's just as painful in Kubernetes. But it's cool that they've written it up. So if you're interested in how this works, I would go and have a look. And what else have we got that's happening? Oh yeah, the Kubernetes storage performance. I thought this was really, really interesting. Looking at like our various settings. I think, why is my internet so slow? All right, here we go. So he had done it previously, and a year ago, I guess. and he did GlusterFS, Ceph, Portworx, and OpenEBS. With CStore, it looks like he's added OpenEBS Maya Store as well as Longhorn. I haven't actually heard of Longhorn, so I don't know much about that. And then I guess he's got GlusterFS, second worst, Portworx remains still top commercial, best open source with Ceph. Well, let's look at Longhorn, cloud native, distributed, block storage, Kubernetes, developed by Rancher. Of course.
Rancher Longhorn.
Yeah. That
Wally Chari is helping us out.
Oh, and the OpenEBS Jiva backend is based on Longhorn, so that's cool. And then he sort of talked about how to get it onto AKS, which is the Azure Kubernetes service, I think. So that's cool that you can tie it into whatever cloud provider you're using and use a different storage provider. And he has a bunch of stuff. I think he has some results. Here we go. Here's our random read-write bandwidth. So you get to see. Look at the Portworx compared to everything else on the random read. That's orders of magnitude faster than some others. So that's interesting. It'd be interesting to dig into how that worked and what the differences were on maybe the disk backends and stuff that might cause that. Okay, cool. So that's storage. We all enjoy storage. Crunchy has a Postgres operator, which I think they've had one for a while, so they may have just got a newer version. I see they're about to do version 4.5 because they've done a 4.5.0 beta 1. The fact they're at like 4 dots, assuming they're using Semver, tells me that we're probably reasonably stable because they've been working on it for quite a while. What do they support? That's good. They support TLS. Always good to see TLS in things, especially for things like backups. Scheduled backups. I mean, there's a lot of features bolded there. So that looks super useful. So if you are running lots of databases in your Kubernetes, operators like this are super useful. And then the other thing that I saw is this. I don't know about you, Cora, but I can't, for the life of me, write a Kubernetes manifest off the top of my head. I can maybe,
this is super cool.
I can maybe write like a config map or a secret, but certainly I can't write a full-on deployment because even just the minimum requirements are kind of way above my ability to remember that much syntax. So you can see you kind of, on the left-hand side, you choose what you want. So if I wanted a daemon set, I'd pick that, and you can see it change the kind to daemon set. You can change your deployment strategies, you can set up volumes, do ports in your containers, affinities, pod security context, so all the things you can and should be doing. So we want Bob to run it, and so there we go, service account name Bob pops up down here. So this is actually really cool. I haven't seen anyone do something like this before, and so that's definitely going to become a bookmark for me because this is the kind of really useful thing that I would find myself using a lot. Usually I just bounce around the kube docs, but obviously if I can just get to something that's a bit more custom for me with a few clicks, I'm going to do that. So that is really cool, and I think the last of our weekend review. So we should now start talking about our what are we talking about? Admission controller webhooks, validating admission controller webhooks, and if all goes well, we might even look at a mutating admission controller webhook. So I'm going to mute myself for a while, Cora, so people get a break from my noise, and if you want to take it away.
All right. Thanks, Paul. Thanks for going through all that weekend review. Thanks, George, for putting all that together. So, yeah, so here in the notes, we thought to do an admission controller, specifically starting with a validating admission controller. But as Paul mentioned, there are also mutating admission controllers. So, but just to start at the beginning, what are admission controllers? So I think this picture is really helpful. This is just in the Kubernetes documentation, as you can see. But an API request comes in to Kubernetes, and of course, it's authenticated as usual, as any API request would be. And after that, there's a couple of opportunities to intercept that request before it gets persisted into etcd, and hence trigger some action in the background. So there's an opportunity to look at it and say, for example, if it's a deployment coming in, do I want to change anything about this deployment based on any condition? For example, if it's this image, then always set the replicas to this, or make sure that there's certain labels, etc. And then a validating one can also just look at it and accept it or reject it. So you can change it, accept it, or reject it, basically. And so that's there are actually admission controllers that are built in, that are available, things like LimitRangers to set resource limits. But what's interesting about the mutating and the validating admission controllers is that they really give you this way to hook in and do anything custom that you want to do. So very powerful and very flexible. And in fact, as I was looking into this a little bit, there's a talk. I should look up the reference later and add it to the show notes. But there was a talk about like hacking Kubernetes, a couple of hackers talking about like hacking Kubernetes and how these admission controllers are also great opportunities to like intercept every request and then like wreak havoc. So use them for good, I guess. That's what we're going to explore, using them for good. So the way that we thought to explore these is to, so I guess just going down the documentation a little bit more, but we picked a couple of existing ones out there, tutorials, GitHub repos, and we were going to go through those and try to get those to work. But they're really good for things like obviously security, ensuring certain policies that you need to enforce are done. So regardless of, taking the burden away from developers to ensure that you're enforcing policies at the entry point of your cluster, governance, of course, managing configuration, managing maybe resource utilization and things like that. So there's mutating webhook configuration resources to use, and then so essentially you register a webhook so that the kube controller can send the request, can take action at the point that it notices that you want to. For example, declare that when, like, for example, if you only want to react to when like deployments are done, or only want to react to like when certain types of resources are created, then you would trigger a webhook, and then that would execute code that you have deployed inside some pod. And then inside that pod, you can really do whatever you want. So we've got one example that I think is using Python, and the other one that's using Go. So we'll see a little bit of variety as we try to get these to work.
So one thing I wanted to mention real quick, do you want to just pop back to that screen?
Yeah.
In the webhook configuration, you have to put in your CA bundle. So generally, you're going to end up using a self-signed certificate. So it's good that you can put your CA bundle in there so that you can validate it is signed by a trusted CA. But one thing I discovered is if you want to use something like Cert Manager to manage your certificates, you kind of have a chicken and egg issue, because Cert Manager creates secrets, and so you then need to extract that secret and then add it to the webhook. So I found myself, when I was doing a mutating webhook with Helm, is I would have to run Helm twice, once to set everything up, but then I had to run it again once I extracted the certificate, turned it base 64 and added it in. So I found that to be an interesting little behavior, and so I may actually open an issue with Kubernetes and suggest that we use either a secret or config map as an option here. Or maybe it is an option and I just didn't find that setting. I'm being told that my audio is good now, so I don't have to mute. That's good. I mean, it's good and bad, right? Because you're going to have to hear me talk about stuff.
Well, that's what we're here for.
Yeah, that's what I'm here for. That's what we're here for. All right, so I think that's all I wanted to mention. Just a weird chicken and egg issue I saw. And of course, the other thing with that chicken and egg issue is if you set this up with a bad CA, then, and your admission controller webhook is looking at pods or deployments, you can't then actually modify anything because the Kubernetes API is going to freak out because it can't talk to the actual webhook because the certificate is bad. So because of the chicken and egg issue there, you also need to be very wary of creating the webhook before or after you have the deployment fully up and running and tested working. That's definitely tricked me up, and when I've been working on the webhooks, probably lost a couple of hours to trying to troubleshoot that and realizing that it's just a chicken and egg issue.
So then the other thing to mention is that you have to actually enable these admission plugins when you start up your cluster. So you need to make sure that's part of your configuration for your cluster. So we'll get to that, I guess. So let's start with this. So we're going to follow this blog post from Eric Shanks. So first of all, huge thanks to Eric Shanks for putting this together. And essentially, so this blog post covers a little bit of the theory that we just talked about, where first a request to the API server gets authenticated and authorized, and then you have an admission controller that takes action, and if the admission controller says it's okay, then accepts the request, then it gets committed to etcd, and then business as usual for Kubernetes. So there's the validating admission controllers and the mutating admission controllers. As we said, the mutating admission controllers will alter the request rather than just accepting or rejecting it. And so in this particular example, there's, let me actually go down to what this particular example is doing. I think the use case here is just to make sure that there is a billing label that exists. And if the billing label, if the deployment the pod that's being created doesn't have a billing label, then it would just be rejected. If it does, then it would be accepted. So I'm going to actually just get the code and we'll start from there. So let me find, where's the link to the GitHub code?
While you're doing that, Moz, I just saw your response. So Moz, it's not the CA certificate of the Kube API server, it's the CA of the webhook itself. You probably could use the CA root in Kubernetes to sign the webhooks, but you don't always necessarily have access to that CA to do so. I think Kubernetes does have some certificate resources, but I've never had a ton of luck using them, which is why I usually reach for Cert Manager. Cert Manager lets you create a CA and then create certificates off that. You create a self-signed issuer, you create a CA, and then you create a new issuer using that CA, and then you create as many certificates as you want based off that CA. That's kind of the workflow you can do with Cert Manager, and that gives you a single root CA that you can share across multiple things. Yeah.
So I pulled, I don't know if you caught that, but the link in this blog post points to the corresponding. This is the IT Hollow blog from Eric Shanks, and so it points to the project, the sample project code on the corresponding GitHub account. I didn't clone that. Instead, I know that Paul has a clone because, as he was saying, so the master branch here is going to have. I don't think you made any changes, right?
No.
Yeah, 4 months ago. Okay, so the master branch has Eric's original code, and then Paul created a TGIK branch in which he does the work that he mentioned for the certs. And also, we've included here this YAML file, which I'll just actually copy from here, to create a kind cluster. And so you can see that this cluster has already the enable admission plugins, including the validating admission webhook and the mutating admission webhook. So for example, like the first time I tried to do this, I was doing on a default Kubernetes, a default Google cluster, which doesn't have these things enabled. And so I ran into an error there, and it was just a little easier to use kind. So I'm just going to go ahead and paste that in there. So I guess, so this also eventually has some test pods that we can deploy once we've deployed the whole thing. And of course, a good place to start is the README. So I guess we'll just walk through the README. Is that all right? And just take it step by step and see what happens?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
All right, and so right now we're within the default directory using certs in a more straightforward way, and then we can switch over to Paul's modifications and try that. But essentially, if you're going to build your own admission controller, you create your custom logic. So this is an example of, as we said, that looks a controller that's going to look for a billing label in the pods that you're trying to deploy. So we'll just take a quick look at that. So this happens to be Python, but it can be whatever you want. And it has a validate endpoint that's going to be called. And then really the code from there on is up to you. And you can see also that it has a setup for the cert. So we're going to have to create these certs and put them in, make sure that they're in this certs directory relative to the root of the runtime. So I guess anything else that you want to raise
here,
Paul?
I was just going to say that one thing I really liked here is, and I've seen more and more people using Python to do admission controller webhooks and also operators. And I think the untyped nature of Python makes it really easy to do this, because you don't have to include a bunch of Kubernetes libraries and define structs and load up objects from those structs. You can just kind of YOLO a bunch of HTTP requests and just look at the object you get back and traverse it as an object. And so I think from a operations point of view, this is more where our comfort levels are. I get lost in Go pretty easy trying to deal with the typing. Obviously there's a lot of safety that comes with that typing, but often for really simple stuff like this, I mean, this is 27 lines of code, so that's pretty impressive for what it does. I mean, obviously there's some HTTP libraries and stuff in the back end or whatever, but I just wanted to say, I think the idea of using Python for this stuff is really appealing to people like myself that are maybe not traditionally or consider themselves to be programmers. It makes it a lot more approachable. And I've seen, as I said, I've seen this for not just admission controllers, but also for operators, and writing really simple code to get pretty powerful operators. It's just a really good, interesting alternative to the depth that you need for Go.
Yes, yeah, it is a lot more concise than Go for sure.
Yeah, and Moz mentions
Mhm.
that OPA Gatekeeper has abstracted a lot of this stuff from us, and that is absolutely true. But sometimes OPA itself is a larger uh, pill to swallow, and people don't want to necessarily take it on right away. And they may have some much simpler use cases that to be solved. And so I think, and also the Rego language is like completely melts my brain. So I've always struggled doing the Rego um, language stuff to drive the OPA stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the great things about this particular example is just how simple it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's really because I guess you can also use QBuilder to kind of get you part way there, right, and give you the scaffolding and then fill in the code. So there's a couple of ways to go about it. But this is incredibly simple. So there's our code. So basically, when the container starts up, the container is going to run this code, right? This is our code. So the next thing would be, of course, to containerize this. So we've got a
but
Docker.
before we do that,
Yeah.
quickly jump back at the code. I think there's
Yeah.
like the workflow of, so you can see it receives a request, and then it then gives a response, right? So it's getting the request, it's checking for the label, and giving that Kate's response, and that Kate's response
Right.
is just that JSONified like admission review response. So it's getting an admission review request, and then it's responding with that admission review response.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's certainly another thing I stumbled across. I stumbled with a bit when I was writing a mutating webhook, is keeping in my head the difference between the response and the request, and sending the right one and receiving the right one. But once you figure it out, it is fairly simple. But certainly looking at the Python version of it, I'm like blown away, as I was just mentioning, how much simpler it is and easier it is to understand.
Cool. Okay. So then, so we have a Docker file in order to containerize that, which really is just going to copy all of the files in this directory into the container. Which when we create the certs, we'll realize that the certs are actually created in I guess we'll create a certs directory so that it matches up with this expected path. And then it just sets the command to start up the Python application. So that's pretty straightforward.
Cora, I know you're
Yeah.
pretty expert at like optimizing your Docker images. So I see that we have a copy of something from the current directory. We run pip install of that, and then we do another copy. So if I remember that correctly, that's because like we used to use add, and add sort of would always negate the cache, whereas if I'm right, copy actually looks to see if the file changed, and if it doesn't negate the cache, and that means that until you get to that final copy of the entire app, everything above will be cached unless you change your requirements, right? So I think that's a good reminder for people when they're building their Docker files, is always try and be cognizant of your order of operations, even if it looks a bit weird. Because like every time I see copying the requirements and then copying the entire directory, my brain like immediately goes, oh, we can optimize this. We don't need to copy twice. But the reality is it's actually optimizing for the cache, not for kind of copying a file up twice.
Mm-hmm. So, and to add to that, actually, having this at the beginning is another optimization,
right,
that you would want to always put things in the order, in an order such that you expect the changes that you expect are more frequent as you go down. So you wouldn't really expect to be changing operating system packages, but then you might expect to change requirements, and then you absolutely expect to be changing your code the most often. So separating those, every instruction creates a layer, and so a layer in itself is either used or not used. And once you break your use of layers, from then on you have to recreate all the subsequent layers. So true. Okay, so And then, so this is going to be our YAML file to deploy this container. And so you can see, first of all, it creates a namespace called validation, and then it deploys just the pod called Warden. That's going to have, we'll have to edit this to my account. And then it creates a corresponding service for that. So I think that's pretty straightforward. And then, so after we're going to take this code, build it as an image. It'll get uploaded. We'll push it to Docker Hub, and then we'll deploy it using this YAML file. And so then we've got this pod sitting out there. And so now the last piece is to deploy the webhook such that that pod is actually handed the requests so that it can evaluate them whenever somebody tries to deploy a pod. And so that's what the webhook is for. And I think there was a question in the chat. Are the webhooks for types of resources? So
yeah,
yeah.
Oh, go ahead. You can answer.
Yeah. So I mean, so I wasn't sure what the question was. Is the webhook a type of resource or for specific types of resources? But there is a type of resource called validating webhook configuration or mutating webhook configuration, and then there's also rules that determine for what other types of resources this webhook is triggered. So in this case, it would only if it's a deployment or a pod, right? But if you're trying to create a new namespace, for example, then this webhook wouldn't get triggered.
Right.
So I think that might answer the question.
Yeah, I think it does. I wonder what it looks like if you have multiple webhooks on the same resources, if they happen in a certain order or they kind of just get like dumped around a list. For CRDs, it's kind of the same thing. They just have like your API group will be whatever your CRD is. And then your resources will be the actual CRD resources. So Kubernetes doesn't necessarily care if it's a Kubernetes originated resource or a CRD resource, because it still ends up as, an API group plus resource.
Cool. All right. So, and then when the webhook is triggered, what it's going to do is call our pod, which we know we've named Warden, and it's in the validation namespace. And as we saw in the code, the path is /validate. So this is exactly how it's going to call. And then we're going to fill in this value in a second. So we can go back to the README and kind of just keep track of where we are. So we're going to, so it says create your custom logic. So that's been done for us in the warden.python. So that's the example that we have that's going to look to see if the pod has a billing label on it. So step 2 would be to update our certgen.sh to match our admission controller. You may need to update the service and namespace where the controller lives. So let's take a look at certgen. So this is going to generate the certs that we need, and so it's just going to cd into this directory. So I'm going to make dir certs so that directory exists, and so that this line will succeed. And then I don't actually think I have to change anything, because we're just using the sample app, and we're going to it'll be called Warden. It'll be in the validation namespace, and that service also exists, as we saw in the Warden case YAML. We just refresh our memory there. There's this service, Warden, in the validation namespace. So we shouldn't have to change that value unless you change the pod name. And so I think I can just run this guy, right? Isn't it not?
You don't need to source it with a dot in front.
Does it hurt? I source everything. Does it hurt to source?
I mean, it doesn't, unless your script has a bunch of exports that override environment variables that you're not expecting to override. But no, it's fine.
I tend to source everything. Okay, so that's done. So now we've got our search directory, and So the next thing we'd want to do is, I think, run the Docker file, right? I think we can do that next, but let's go back to the README so we're following it in order. So run the search and script. So now we've got our certificates, and we want to, okay, so let's get the base 64 value of this first. All right, so then we're going to copy this value and put it into our webhook YAML right here and save that. So we'll use that in a second. And let's go back to the README here and say, so we did step 5, we pasted it into the webhook YAML, and now we can build a container. So I don't have anything, I think, right now. Oh, I do. Let me clean all of that up.
While you're running that, Yumo, so we're not actually sure about multiple webhooks listening for the same resource. Now, given it is Kubernetes, I would say that it doesn't do them in any specific order. So they're probably just randomly called until they succeed. I wonder, it'd be interesting to see if anyone's done a blog post or anything on how that would look. Because I would imagine that on a sufficiently complex Kubernetes cluster, you would probably end up in situations where you might have multiple webhooks doing different things across the same resources. I don't know. Maybe George, do you want to do a Google while we're on here and see if you see anything and dump it in chat, and we can always pop across to a browser and have a look at it if we want.
So, okay, so I'm going to call this Warden V1. All right. So we're building the container here. Here's the command, docker build, whatever's in the local directory, and I'm tagging the image name with my Docker hub, registry name, and I'll wait for that to finish. Any other questions? Apologies, I missed the answer about multiple webhooks listening for the same resource. So we don't know the answer. I think we can Google it. I don't know if, yeah, I don't know. But I don't even know. Let's see.
That very first link had something about if multiple.
Sorry. Oh, I see that. Okay. If multiple webhooks are specified in a single configuration, each should be given a unique name in order to make resulting audit logs and metrics easier to match. To register admission webhooks. I mean, I guess if they're probably
I would bet.
I guess yeah.
It sends a request to every webhook that matches, and then it waits to get a response back from each of those before it lets you go ahead. So it's probably simultaneous, unordered, and assumes that none of them are relying on another one of them. I guess you might be able to put in some sort of delay operation on a subsequent webhook if you did need them to rely on each other. But that sounds like it would be fragile.
I mean, it would only work for validating ones, right? Because I guess, I mean, ideally you would probably want, if you want to have multiple webhooks, you'd put them here in order, right? Because if you have mutating webhooks, like if you're gonna if they would go off in parallel, if it was possible to have multiple mutating ones and they would go off in parallel, then you would have multiple mutations of your resource, which wouldn't really
but it's still the
sense.
Kube API doing that mutation with etcd. So as long as the Kube API is able to resolve simultaneous attempts at changing something, which it already has to be able to do, right? Because if you and I were both editing a deployment at the same time, the Kube API needs to be able to deal with that. So I think it would probably be okay.
Okay, so I'm just doing a Docker push to make sure that the link of this container with all of the right certs is pushed to Docker Hub. And so while that's happening, we can come back here. So we've pasted the base64 into the webhook. We built the container. We pushed it to our repository. So we want to update wardenkate's YAML file to point to our new image. So we did that already. I changed the name to my Docker Hub registry. All right. So, okay. So now we need a cluster, actually. So I think let's do this in a different window. So does it create cluster or is it just create cluster? And a name, I guess. Name. So we'll call this TGIK. All right. So what we have here is kind. So Kubernetes and Docker creating a 2-node cluster. One is our control plane and one is our worker. And applying this one piece of configuration that is to enable the admissions plugins so that we can use the validating admission webhook in this case. So we'll wait for those two things to happen. Let's see. So Moz says, I think it sends a request randomly to any of them. Oh yeah, the kind config. Oh, you're welcome. It does save time. Yeah, I tried this. So first I was trying this on GKE and I ran into the error where I realized that you did have to set the admission controllers. And Paul and I were chatting about it. So I actually didn't try it. I just switched. I switched to a different kind of cluster, but I guess you can probably go into GKE and set that. But since it's a managed cluster, I saw some stuff on Google that said just on the internet that said that you couldn't do it on GKE because it was a managed cluster. But then Paul, as you had mentioned, that it probably was possible. So yeah, maybe there is. Yeah.
I think in the GKE cluster config, you can set those things on and off. I'm sure I've done it before, but okay. my memory's not great, so maybe I haven't.
Mm-hmm. And then I tried. So my next attempt was on Minikube, and I don't know what I was doing wrong, but I was getting some strange errors, and then everything worked on kind with this configuration. So lived up to its name. Okay, so we've got our container up on Docker Hub and we've got our cluster running. So we can go ahead and do the next step, which is to apply the wardenkate's YAML file to deploy the actual pod. So let's do apply -f. Yeah, first let's do, let's just make sure. And we're on the right cluster. Okay, so we're on the kind TGIK cluster, which is good. And so now we can do a kapply with our warden file. Okay, so it's created the three resources that were in this warden K8's file. So it's created the validation namespace, it's created our pod and the service for it. And so now the next thing, as we can see here, apply the webhook YAML. would be to actually hook it up so that when future pods are deployed, the webhook would be triggered, and then the request would first be sent to our warden pod before it would be applied to etcd. And there's a question: is your admission controller basically on the critical path for that particular resource? The resource will not get created or modified if you're well, once you, yeah, I mean, I guess once we create the webhook, then anytime anybody tries to apply or create or apply a pod to the cluster, the request would first be sent to the validating, to this warden pod. And at that point, if warden, I guess if it doesn't work, if warden's not responding, unless warden responds true, it won't.
Once we've shown how it works, we can delete the pod and leave the webhook up and see what happens. And we should see a failure.
All right, right. Okay, so let's apply the webhook. All right, so now we've got some test pods here. And so this one has a billing label. So we would expect, well, and I can show you actually, let's see. Let's see first. Okay, so we've got our warden pod running in the validation namespace. And in fact, so we've got our pod and our service running in the validation namespace, right? And then we also have the validating webhook that we created in the default namespace. So those are the resources that we've deployed so far, right? So let's, yeah. Oh, interesting. Oh, and here it is.
Michael just said there's a failure policy that defines what happens. If
okay, so let's do, okay, so we're going to deploy our first
pod. There it is, failure policy. Huh. Yeah.
And we're expecting this one to succeed. Awesome. Okay. And our second pod does not have a billing label. So we would expect this one to fail. Error from server. Error when creating the test pod. Admission webhook warden validation service denied the request. No labels exist. A billing label is required. So that is pretty cool. So we've gotten here. No labels exist. So this one doesn't have any labels at all. And let's see, case number 3 then is some other label, but not billing label. And so we would expect that to be the third case in the code that says not allowed without a billing label, and just back to the code here. So now we've hit this condition. So that's pretty cool. Right? Cool way to set a policy, good way to, and I mean, that's the simplest example, right? You could do, I was thinking the other day I was putting together a cluster for the RSocket gateway, and because of the way that cluster works, I would have to make sure that every node, if you want to make like a 3-node cluster, it is the same container, but each one, you can't actually scale. Each one has to have a different name. So even though it's using the same container, each one is a different deployment. And so I would have had to force the replication count for each one to be 1. And I'm glad to know that this exists, because this would be the perfect way to do it.
Yeah. So Tim just said that he made a comment earlier that got filtered. There's a reinvocation policy that can rerun the webhook if there's multiple webhooks mutating something. So I guess you could make sure at the end, after all the mutation, do a second pass at a validation, make sure that it's still valid. So that makes a bit more sense and probably gives you a sane way to do that validation without having any sort of strict ordering. I feel like that's one of the major issues we have with resources in Kubernetes, is so many things have an expectation of strict ordering, and Kubernetes just doesn't give that to us.
Mm.
And so we come up with all these neat tricks to sort of fake our way into not needing it.
A single ordering of mutating admissions plugins does not work for all cases. A mutating webhook can add a new substructure to the object. And other mutating plugins which have already run may have opinions on those new structures. So you can allow mutating admission plugins to observe changes made by other plugins, and there can be rerun.
Yeah, so I think if we were to set a reinvocation policy set to if needed on this one, and then if we had a mutating webhook that also messed with labels, it would rerun this and revalidate, which is pretty good.
Interesting.
Right?
Yeah, that seems like really... it seems very intelligent. Mutating webhooks must be idempotent, able to successfully process an object that they have already admitted and potentially modified.
Yep.
And there's a failure policy. Okay, cool. So, all right, so we've done this example. So I guess the variation we could do on this is to do... what is it? Git reset.
You can usually just do a git stash and hide it.
Yeah, okay.
Well, that works too.
Just git stash.
Yeah, I usually do git stash, so if I need to get it again, I can do a git stash pop.
Got it. So git checkout. So TGIK?
Sure.
Would be overwritten. All right.
Oh, because you added the kind. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. I need to just remove it and then have to stash again. All right. Okay. So, so in this case, did you update your README?
Yeah, if you look at the README,
cool. Okay.
I'm pretty sure I updated it. And you can see the first thing I do is create a cert manager namespace and deploy cert manager.
So actually, should I clean up everything? I know you have these handy.
Yeah, it might be a good idea. Just do a delete the.
All right.
Oh, actually, why don't you delete the pod and rerun the?
Yeah. Oh,
thing,
right.
and
We
we'll see
forgot
the
about
failure.
that. Okay. Okay. So we just want to just only the pod.
Yeah.
Oops.
Oh, you missed the N. Missed the N on the dash.
Missed the end on. Oh. Michael's a troublemaker. Can you build an infinite loop with two mutating admission controllers? One adds a label and another one removes a label.
Michael, you're a bad person and you should feel bad.
Yes, and then who do you call to troubleshoot your problem as you walk away for a coffee break?
You just call the Kubernetes hotline. I heard George mans the Kubernetes hotline 24/7.
All right, so we're gonna do apply. I guess it'll work if we. So okay, so we want to apply any one of these. Now I wonder, because it's unchanged, would that have been caught, or that would have been caught earlier? So maybe the Kubernetes API is just discarding it altogether.
Yeah, that's
is that what the order? So let me go ahead and delete that one first, and then we'll recreate it. Okay, yeah. So yeah, actually, yeah, this is, I got this error at some point because I wasn't, when I was working on this, I wasn't, initially when I was trying to figure out the errors on Google and then on Minikube, I wasn't at one point properly cleaning everything up, and I did run across this error, but I didn't immediately realize it was because the pod wasn't there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's trying to send basically the request to. Now, what would be interesting also.
Yeah, this is
that policy,
that chicken and egg issue. Whereas if you try and start the warden pod to fix this problem, it won't let you because the webhook's trying to talk to the warden pod.
But then what if the policy were ignored?
Oh, yeah, okay.
Was that the policy? Let's see. Failure policy, ignore or fail. Shall we try that?
Yeah, set that to ignore. And that'll hopefully
ignore. Oh, you know what though? I have to like unstash it because it has a different value. So
okay,
yeah.
So just jump back to the jump back to the master branch and do a get stash pop.
Your local changes.
All right.
Wait, what did I change? Did I change something? Webhook YAML? I could do a get reset here, right?
Yeah, do a get reset.
It'll do it. And it just does it within this branch. So hopefully get checkout master and get stash pop.
Yep.
Okay, so now we wanted to take the webhook YAML and set this to ignore. Okay, and now we can try that pod again. Okay, so let's give that a shot. Oh, cool. All right. So, okay, so we're missing the pod. So when the failure policy is fail, we get this error here that says I tried calling the pod, but the pod wasn't there. And then when the failure policy is ignore, it doesn't care that the pod wasn't there.
Nice. That's
pretty cool. Okay, so now
it'd be good if it gave you a warning using that new warning feature to say that it was supposed to go through a admission controller.
I tried and I didn't care. Okay, so let's go back to.
You might need to stash that change you just made to the webhook.
I changed it back.
Oh, okay, cool. Good.
I changed it back, but maybe I should apply it. Well, we're going to regenerate the certs anyway, right?
Yeah,
so is there any? Yeah.
Let's go ahead.
Is there anything else you want to try?
Let's go ahead and just delete that webhook and namespace.
Okay. Let me go back to the other branch.
No, do it from master.
Okay, so I'll just do delete namespace validation.
Yeah.
And then we'll delete the webhook that is in the default namespace.
Yeah.
Oops. And that's it, right? I think we're clean.
Yeah. Where do the test pods go? Do they go into the?
Oh, you're right.
Which namespace?
They are. I think they're in the default actually. Right. I keep doing this. Okay, pods.
You could probably just do a k-delete-f test as pods and just clean them all up.
Oh, I think that, well, the other two never got created.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
They didn't have the label.
That's right.
All right, so let's go back to the TGIK branch. Okay. So
So why don't you
Where were
have
we?
a look at the warden cates.yaml, and I'll just show the difference, the changes I made to that.
Sure.
So you can see I added two files from a secret as volumes, and so cert manager creates the file names TLS cert and TLS key, so I have to make sure they're named correctly for warden, so I don't have to mess with the warden source. And so the easiest way to do that was to name them out like this. And so that will ensure if I have a secret called warden server TLS, it'll get mounted into the pod. And then if you click on the certs.yaml, we'll see how we're calling the certs. So we start with creating a self-signed issuer, and we use that self-signed. You can see the spec is self-signed. We use that spec to create a validation CA. And you can see I've got is CA set to true. And then we create a second issuer that uses the CA from the secret that certificate creates. Right? So now we have an issuer that's going to use our own CA. And then finally we have a certificate that we're going to use for warden, which is CA false, but it has the three expected DNS names. So whether you call it directly with just warden or the full. And I think from a performance issue, I think like in the webhook, you're always better off using the full DNS, and that way it doesn't have to iterate through a bunch of failures in the DNS search suffix. So it's probably a little bit early to be optimizing for that, but that is definitely something that might be an issue on larger clusters.
Mm-hmm.
So other than that, though, it's basically the same thing. And so if you go to we probably don't even need to run it, but if you go through the README, you can see we're just installing Cert Manager.
Create so separate namespace.
Yeah.
And apply that YAML that we just looked through.
Mm-hmm.
Update the certs.yaml.
Yeah.
Oh, first the cert manager, and then update the certs to your namespace, and then apply that.
Yeah.
The certs. And then get that base 64 and still.
Oh yeah, there's a mistake right there. I didn't fix that. So you see get the base 64. That should be in backticks, right? So I screwed up my doc there. Because I want
what should be in backticks?
So I want the output of that kubectl command to be the CA variable.
Okay.
So I just input backticks.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
This whole thing should be in backticks.
Exactly.
So that it's stored in this environment variable.
Yeah.
Okay, and then you're using that environment variable. Are you?
No, if you go to the README, I do a sed somewhere, or maybe I.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, you change CA bundle for the environment variable. Cool. And then the rest is the same. Yeah, and then the handy cleanup. So remember not only to delete the stuff in the validation namespace, which is where you deployed your actual validation admission controller, but also the webhook, which is in a different namespace.
Yeah, that's right. Actually, I think the webhook configuration, I don't think that's namespaced.
It could be anywhere.
Yeah, because it's just a configuration, and so I don't think those objects are actually namespaced. Yeah, and so the reason I did this one was just to kind of show what it would look like if you didn't want to hard code your certificates into your image. Because with this done, you can just have a generic image in a registry, because the certificates all happen afterwards. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was a useful thing to demonstrate. And then how are we doing for time? Do you want to have a look at the admission controller, the mutating admission controller?
I think so. So we had so one other example also from Paul's account here. So and this one I haven't tried it.
Oh, fun.
So yeah, so this will be truly the other one. It's a little daunting to come up and online and say like, all right, I'll just figure it out in front of everyone. So I did try the first one,
Yeah.
but this is for real. So and so I guess the M is for mutating, but what is 13K?
I think it's mutating webhook is M13K using the shortening of like the same way Kubernetes is K8S.
Oh, mutating. Oh,
Yeah, mutating webhook.
Oh, but okay. What could be MU? Yeah. Anyway, okay, I get it now.
And so my thought, my
yeah,
goal here was to kind of see if I could use like an overlay system like Customize or YTT to do the actual mutation. And so basically, I think I just exec out to YTT is what I did. So it like makes it really simple, and you could literally like you do it through like JQ or YQ or like even said you could do if you really wanted to. So I thought it was kind of interesting just to play with that concept of what if I want to really dumb it down and take the logic out of the controller. So if you go to, I guess, under package, because this is kind of where, you know, it was sort of written more like a traditional Go language. So there's like a CLI directory, a command directory for the actual CLI, and then a webhook directory under package. You can see we kind of have admission response. So you can see that's just going to kind of do what we did on the other one, just with a lot more code. The process body, I guess, I think is where we're maybe running it through YTT. It's been a while since I wrote this, so I can't fully remember. No, that looks like we're just
YAML.unmarshal.
We're just messing with the YAML.
Mutate. There's a mutate function. This is probably it. Mutate returns what it gets.
Oh yeah, here it is. So if you look down, the run command is running mutate command and mutate arguments. And so these are passed in via the CLI when you start up the controller. So the mutate command, I think, by default is YTT, and the args are the files to mutate.
And where are those YTT commands?
So if you pop up to the...
And then, I'm sorry, just before we pop out here, just on the point. So for the validating admission controller, the path is
mutate.
Validate.
That's right. Yeah.
Mutate.
Yeah. And so you could have a webhook controller that does both validation and mutate and just handle both endpoints. And you can see I also added a health there, so I could use a readiness probe.
Right.
Yeah. And then so if you click on the command up in the directory structure, so I used is it Cobra, which is kind of the go-to CLI tooling for serve is the right spot. So if you run this with serve, you then get a bunch of command line arguments that you can fill in, which if you scroll further down, you'll see here's the flags you can pass in. So cert, key, port, command, and args. Oh, so my my default is just gonna cat it. And then if you then look at maybe we look at my example deployment, we'll see where I'm calling the arguments. So you go through deploy. I actually wrote this as a Helm chart, so
I noticed that. It's like how many Did Paul throw in here?
Yeah.
Do you want me to go the examples deployment?
Yeah, you
Are
can
you
start
changing
with the
the port
deployment.
here? Is that something you're mutating? Are you basically saying set the port to 8443?
No, that's setting the default to 8443. So if you don't specify a
Oh,
port, it'll just use 8443.
oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So, sorry, is this the file you wanted me to open? And there is no port here,
no.
actually.
This is just maybe open up the Helm chart. I think these are like examples to actually run through. So click on templates. And if you look at the deployment,
Okay.
so it's templated out. But if you look down for the command, the container, here's my command. And you can see my args are passing in the cert key, the command ytt, and then pointing at a directory called app mutate. And that app mutate is coming from a config map. And so if you click on the config map,
Click on the config map.
in the directory structure, you can see the config map is a YTC file that will basically mutate. You see, it looks for a kind of secret, and if it doesn't have the label M13K, it will add it.
Interesting. So this means that you can use this mutating admission controller sort of generically, and then the specific mutations you want to make would all be defined by the config map.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And so you could even set this, like if you change this to a billing label, you would then be able to use it like in conjunction with your validating. So maybe if it didn't have one, you would set a default billing to like, generic or some generic account. And that way you wouldn't block people from being able to deploy pods or whatever just because they don't have a label. But so we're seeing that. Do we want to just jump to the docs and run through and test it out?
Yeah. All right. So create a TLS pair.
All right. So hold on. So that's just if you want to test it out locally, like just like go run on the command line. So
locally, got it.
Let's roll down
deploy.
to the deploy via Helm. Have you got Helm installed?
Okay. So
let's check your CLI.
Yes.
What version have you got?
What version? 3.3.1.
That's good. That's good enough. Perfect. All right. So let's go ahead. You've already got the cluster still. So get cert manager deployed.
So let's
just
so wait. So I've got the cluster. Do you want me to do the create namespace or just skip?
Just start at the deploy
here. Okay. Alrighty. So we're gonna create this namespace called cert manager and then apply this particular cert manager YAML that we looked at.
Yep.
Oops. Oh, I didn't copy. Sorry.
So that's basically just pulling down the default cert manager from wherever it lives on the internet. So we're basically curl bashing the cert manager.
Okay.
I could have added it as a Helm dependency, but I didn't get to that.
Interesting. I'm not able to. I'm going to copy from over here. Maybe this will work. For some reason, I can't copy from the left.
Huh.
Running locally, running deploy. Let's try this. Okay. Yeah, weird. Okay, so namespace created, and then we'll deploy the cert manager first. Is there a way you can tell kubectl to try the admission controller, but in dry run mode? I think there.
So
I want to say that there is.
You can run -- dry mode. I'm not sure if. I mean, we can test that in a minute once we have the mutating webhook up.
I feel like I have like a visual memory of seeing that. Unless I'm confusing it with something else, but I believe that I did see that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got the cert manager.
Yep.
And so now we're going to, oh, I know, can't do that. Here, right?
Yep.
Create this namespace, and then we're going to install using Helm.
So now if you do a kubectl get certificates.
Certs? No. I have to write the whole thing.
Oh, and you need to be in the M13K namespace.
Okay.
So you see we have those two certificates. And now if you do a get secrets in that same namespace, you'll see that we have that. Or you can just, go ahead and just run the CA equals.
All right, well, let me, I'll do this part.
While you're doing that,
here.
Moz just mentioned there's a new option to do a dry run as server side. So if we try something out with dry run equals server, we should see it pass through the mutating webhook.
Okay, cool. So, okay, so I've added the backticks there. So.
Oh, no, you don't need it on this one. Because we've got it inside the dollar.
Oh, you got the dollar. Yeah. Okay, so we have our environment variable properly populated. And so Helm upgrade with this environment variable.
Yeah. And so that was that chicken and egg issue I mentioned earlier, where we had to do the Helm deploy to get the certificates, but then we needed to pass the CA bundle back into Helm to fill out the webhook correctly. So yeah, now you can do that test and make sure it does it.
Okay, secret test created.
Right. And then we'll do it.
And there it is.
There it is. So why don't you create a second secret and give it a different name and put --s dry run and -o YAML, and we'll see what we get out.
Dry run. So I guess
I'll do a -o YAML so we can see the output. Yeah, so that that all happened at the client side, so it didn't create it. So now do rerun that command with dry run equals server. Oh, there we go. We learn a thing. Admission webhooks don't support dry run. So I don't know if that's something we need to add as a
I wonder
as a webhook configuration, or it's just something that we're not allowed to do.
There's a new option to run dry side on the server side.
Yeah, which is what we just did.
Yeah. But that's what we just did. Dry run admission webhook. Okay. Dry run false. So where would this go? In the admission review. So I guess it gets deployed like you'd have to redeploy it. Like it's either operating in dry run or it's not.
Well, I think
opposed to
this is the actual request. So this isn't the webhook itself, it's the request that's going to the webhook. So the webhook is seeing dry run true, when you just did it, and then it's saying it doesn't support that. So there might be some more work in the Go side of things to make it support.
But this would, yeah, because this implies that it is supported, right? Webhooks with side effects should avoid actuating those side effects when dry run is true.
Yeah, so I think webhooks support it, but I might need to actually program in some support.
Do something in the webhook.
Yeah. So that might be something I have a look at. Oh, side effects.
Yeah, here you go. Webhooks indicate whether they have side effects using the side effects field.
Yeah. So if you look at the none on dry run, calling the webhook will possibly have side effects. If a request with dry run true is sent to the webhook will suppress the side effects if the webhook is dry run aware. So clearly I would need to update the webhook to support dealing with a dry run, which I'm not sure why, because like I would think with a server with a dry run set to server, the API server should send the admission request, get the admission response, and then give that response back to kubectl. So I think it might be a bit of a.
Do you think it's like if you don't specify anything, then it assumes that it's not supported?
Yeah.
Like you have to be more deliberate about it. So if side effects are required during the admission, they must be suppressed. It's weird that they are pushing dry run on the webhook.
Well, you kind of want, if you've got dry run set to server, you kind of want it pushed through the webhook. Yeah, so it should go to the API server. The API server should see that we have a validating webhook. It should send the request. It should get the response, and then it should pass that response back to kubectl instead of acting on that response. Is like the way my brain logically thinks about it. But clearly there's something in Kubernetes world that doesn't want to be that simple about it. So there's probably something to do with complex distributed systems I don't understand that someone else did when they wrote the code. Oh, yeah, you're right. The API server should be the one refusing to save the etcd, but because we're using dry run mode, it's never saving the etcd, right? So dry run server means that the server does all the processing, but instead of saving it, it kicks it back to the client. And so it would never have saved it to etcd in the first place. But I agree, it should be the server making the decision to allow it, not the webhook, unless, as I said, there's something about the way it works that I don't understand.
I'm still a little confused by this specific, like the wording of the error message. Yeah. Right? It seems weird.
Yeah.
Oh, unless it's the version.
Oh, here we go.
Add
dry runnable. So if we look at the...
What version are we using? Where's the webhook here? So wait, where is the webhook?
Yeah, under templates, admission registration. It's the admission registration, yeah.
Okay, so, and it is v1 beta 1. So what is this saying? Add dry run to v1 beta 1.
Yeah, and then dry runnable. So it's that second one we want. So I wonder, maybe look at the actual changes and see if we can see.
Which would be
up the top. Click on files changed.
This one?
Files changed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is this because they're too big? Swagger.
Oh yeah. So I think that
Second one, maybe?
Swagger spec.
Or here, dry run indicates. Oh, oops.
No. It was dry runnable. It was the thing we were looking for. Maybe just do a word search for dry runnable.
Yeah. Dry run. Doesn't show up here, but
Okay.
I wonder if it's because.
Yeah. And so I
Is there a
think
search?
if you look at the API reference for admission registrations, I think that's the one we want. So that third one down.
This one?
I think that's the one.
Okay. Dry runnable still does not show up here.
All right. I don't see any changes in there. That looks relevant. Side effects. Function propagation. Yeah. I don't think we need to figure it out. It looks like some support was added for it. We would just need to figure out what that would be. And that was actually in 2018. So maybe it's in the actual mutating webhook configuration spec. So that might be the place to look.
So in the is it the API? What's the address? Is it?
I would just.
This one? Here?
Maybe. Admission registration.
Here we go. V1 beta 1. And what would be?
Yeah, well, it's the.
What would be V1?
We're in beta. We're still in. I think I can't remember if I was calling.
So it's adding it to beta 1, so it would be in here then, I guess.
And then
types, maybe.
And
I don't see dry runnable. Dry RUN. Oh, yeah. Once I add another N, it goes away. On the webhook. So I don't know where that dry runnable would be.
Yeah. Was that the only instance of the word dry run?
Dry run, so it appears here 3 times. So I'd say her total of 7 times.
So let's just pop through and see if anything jumps out.
Requests with the dry run attribute will be auto rejected if they match a webhook with side effects equals unknown. So I guess maybe we have to set side effects.
Yeah, we have to set side effects.
Okay. And so we can set, well, we could try that, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's see what the option, because there was one that was not on dry run, none on dry run. So then the question is, where exactly does the side effects go?
Yeah. Was there empty side effects in the code that we already had?
I don't think so, but I guess it would go either here. There we go. So we could try that, right?
Yeah.
Accepted values are unknown, none, some, or none on dry run webhooks. All right, so then to reapply this,
you could just run that Helm upgrade again.
okay. All right, and then we had our dry run server side. All right.
There it is. And so let's look for
And
labels. There it is. There's the label.
Awesome.
Nice.
So there we go. Learned a couple of new things.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. I didn't have to change anything in the controller. It was just the request, the configuration itself.
Awesome.
Cool.
Is there other stuff that we should I mean that's all we had planned.
Yeah. I think we've been going for quite a while, so people probably want to break from our voices.
We're super grateful for
Oh,
for all of you
Yogi,
who stuck with.
you are
Yeah.
correct. We should have used kubectl explain.
Oh.
I feel really silly that didn't jump out at me as the obvious thing to do. Cora, do you want to just actually run kubectl explain and see how quick it actually shows up there?
What's the
So I think you just give it
this thing?
yeah.
Just like that. API version, kind, metadata.
Look at that.
And
then I think you can do -R to get recursive. No, -- recursive. You could read the doc, or you can just guess.
Oh, that's so funny. I remember this from the studying for the CCAT exam, and then I
there
totally
it is.
forgot about kubectl explain. So we have. So where is this field? Side effects.
Yeah.
Oh, about where it goes in the order. Yeah. Cool. Got it. Awesome.
Can we get explain outputted as JSON or YAML? I wonder. Because like that's super difficult to like read.
Like that?
Yeah.
Apparently not.
No.
Doesn't like the -O.
Okay.
Yeah. This has been fun.
Yeah.
I was, it's a little daunting to come out and try things, but everybody's been amazing with their questions and their support, and
Right.
for just add the field with the dots. So with recursive, like meaning like side effects.
Oh, you probably
With
need to
the
do like
dots?
spec dot side effects.
Something like that.
No, webhooks.
Webhooks.
Yeah,
Oh,
because
right.
it's under webhooks.
Spec.webhooks.
So Yogi's saying kubectl
Oh,
pod
yeah.
spec
So
is
just
kind
do do an easier one. Explain pod.spec. Oh, and then it gives you more detail about each one.
So if we redid
You have
it,
to go like.
if we redo our one, I think we do dot
But it is.
webhook.
Oh, what? But it is. It should be. Oh, maybe did I?
Yeah, just bring our command
Oh,
back
got
up.
it. Got it. Webhooks. Dot side effects.
Oh, yeah, we still need the admission controller config thing.
Oh, okay, without the spec. Gotcha.
Yeah, so I think mutating webhook configuration dot webhooks is what we're looking for. So just get rid of the recursive and dot that out. Yeah.
There we go.
All right.
Oh, okay. Awesome.
We got
Thank
there.
you.
We got there. A little bit of bumbling around in the dark, but we got there.
But this has been so much fun. So thanks to everybody who stuck around, who helped us out, who encouraged us. Thank you for your interest. Thank you, Paul, for doing this with me.
Oh, thank you for doing all the hard work and letting me just like be the peanut gallery.
I don't know that I did the hard work. I just, I ran through your README. So, but thank you to Eric Shanks for the first example, and thank you to Josh and George for all of their behind the scenes sort of logistic work with TGIK in general.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been fun hosting.
Yeah. All right, folks. We'll see you all later, and I'm going to hit that stop stream button.
Awesome.
Bye.
Have a great weekend.